Welcome back to DC Today. There's a spotlight on systemic racism in the wake of COVID-19, police-involved killings, and protests against police brutality. But there's another light being shown on the ways systemic racism can derail the promise of people of color in the world of education. Joining me to talk about their report that challenges the nation's top public colleges to look like the diverse nation that we are, Dr. Andrew Nichols and Dr. Kayla C. Elliott of the Education Trust. Kayla and Drew, welcome to DC Today.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
It's nice to have both of you. You know, the Education Trust has issued a challenge to the country's top 101 public colleges. If Black lives really do matter, then you guys say they need to prove it. What are these institutions not doing based on your research? Drew?
Well, there's a lot of things that institutions aren't doing. The first issue is they need to get their actions to match their rhetoric. A lot of these college presidents and leaders will talk a lot about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but the problem is they're not acting in ways that we feel like really push forward that equity agenda. And this new report, Segregation Forever, really digs into what's happening at the 101 most selective public colleges and universities. And what we really wanted to do was look at the state of access for Black and Latino students and see how things have changed since the year 2000. And really, when you look at the data, what we see is that these institutions are not doing a very good job of making their colleges and universities accessible for Black and Latino students.
Why is college enrollment also important in the Black Lives Matter conversation?
Well, you know, at these particular institutions, they really have a choice about who they want to enroll. And a lot of people in the higher ed community are focused on college completion, which is important. But what we don't really want to focus on, or what we're not focusing on, is there is still a significant access issue that needs to be addressed, particularly at a lot of selective institutions. It's not enough for there to just be lots of Black students at community colleges or for-profit institutions or at institutions that are less selective. They also need to have a place here. The reason being is these colleges have higher graduation rates. We know that their graduates go on to earn more in the labor market. And we also know that many of their graduates go on to have influential positions in business and politics. You know, there's a reason there was a college, scandal where parents were paying millions and millions of dollars to get their students into selective institutions. It's because it actually matters and it can influence your lives. And what we know is that these institutions simply aren't doing what they can to enroll what we think is a representative share of Black and Latino students. It's important for these institutions, particularly because they're tax exempt and taxpayer funded, that their student body should actually match the racial and ethnic diversity of the tax-paying residents in those particular states. And they're not.
So Kayla, did you want to jump in here?
Sure. I think we've seen a lot of institutions of higher ed to issue statements about Black Lives Matter, about the importance of diversity and inclusion on their campus, about embracing and welcoming their Black faculty and their Black students. And we've seen very little in this report to back up what they said. So I think our call is to put your money where your mouth is and to enroll and to do exactly what you said, to prove it through your enrollment strategies, to prove it through your recruitment strategies, to prove it through your admission strategies.
You know, there may be other groups looking at this thinking, well, okay, y'all are talking Black Lives Matter. We thought that was just about police brutality, prison reform. Now y'all are talking about higher education. Why is that being included in the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the data now, what we know is having a college degree or some sort of college credential is absolutely important for your life trajectory. If you look at all new jobs, about 2/3 of new jobs are going to require some form of college. And so if we're talking about Black Lives Matter, we have to be talking about college education because it's essential for kind of participation in the labor market and kind of social economic mobility towards the middle class and upwards.
I think not only that, but when you look at the role of higher education, it's one of the few fields that touches almost everything else. And so when we're talking about changes to police to policing and to prison policies. When we're talking about changes to the judiciary, we're talking about changes to how people are charged. When we're talking about, I think there's been a lot of ties between COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter and the fact that Black people are dying at an extraordinary rate. When we talk about who is training nurses and doctors and other healthcare officials, they all have to touch higher education at some point, whether that is a nurse training program, whether that is a 4-year college, a 2-year college, or a medical school. Those institutions need to be leading with diversity, equity, and Black Lives Matter at the center. They need to be enrolling Black people so that we can ensure that we have Black folks in those positions, in those fields, to make changes and to be a part of conversations. And not only that, to actually be able to, like Drew said, have access to the mobility that comes from them.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you put it in that context where the conversation, it's all one. Yeah, there may be different topics, but it's all under the umbrella of, yes, Black lives do matter in this facet, all facets. So everybody stay with us. We've stated the problems. When we come back, let's talk about your recommendations and the solutions to increase the equity. More with Kayla and Andrew when we come back.